y'all, and welcome to the Hillbilly Chicken Ranch. I'm Susan, I'm your hostess, and we are in my kitchen today. We're putting together a no salt spice mix that we can use on our food that doesn't contain salt. I have a lot of viewers that have requested no salt spices or seasoning mixes, and this one I found in the Gooseberry Patch Good for You cookbook. It's the blue binder, and I'll try to remember to put a link of this book in the description box below if you're interested in purchasing it. I picked this one up at a thrift store, so I am not even affiliated with this company. And the recipe is found on 195. I've already made changes to the recipe, and I'm going to have to change it again because the measurements in the book were incorrect. So it's supposed to end up with a half a cup. Well, they had a half teaspoon of this and a quarter teaspoon of that. There's no way it was going to make a half a cup of the seasoning. So somebody messed up on that one. But she did put in here that she sometimes uses lemon pepper instead of white pepper and dried lemon peel. So that's a good notation. We're going to make this. I'm going to give it a little taste, let you know what it tastes like and what I think that you can use this in. And I did make the recipe up at the beginning of this video. I'll show you in the jar what it came out to be. Following her recipe doubled, and I doubled all the ingredients. And it wasn't near as much as she said it was going to be. So we're going to get this done, and I appreciate you watching. Please hit the thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe. Share me out. I appreciate it. Thank you. Doubled recipe blooper. Okay, I'm doubling the recipe for the no salt seasoning, and we are going to get this jarred up. But before I jar it up, I got to get my Nutra-Bullet ready, because I want it all blended together. My first ingredient will be the garlic powder. And the recipe calls for a half teaspoon of garlic powder, but I am doubling this recipe, and I'm going to use 1 teaspoon instead of 1/2 teaspoon. I need thyme leaves. I have thyme leaves, but I also have it ground, so I'm just going to use the ground. And the recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon. The next ingredient is the onion powder. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm doubling, so it will be a 1/2 teaspoon. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika, and I'm doubling again. It will be a 1/2 teaspoon. And the recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of dried lemon peel. Well, I don't have dried lemon peel. I do have lemon pepper. And I'm just going to go ahead and make this 1½ teaspoons. That's 1 and 1/2. I took care of the pepper and the lemon peel. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard. If you don't have dry mustard, you can always use mustard seed and grind them down. I'm doubling this, so it'll be a 1/2 teaspoon. And it calls for 1/8 teaspoon of celery seed. Well, I don't have celery seed. I have celery powder. And I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of that. Parsley flakes, it does not call for, but I'm adding it anyway. And I'm adding about a tablespoon of parsley flakes. And I'm going to set this in my Nutra-Bullet and get it started. That don't look like much. Okay. Start. Recipe redo. Okay, the recipe in the book had the wrong measurements. It's supposed to make a half a cup of seasoning, but as you can see, I doubled it, and that's what I got. So I'm going to start this over again, and we are going to get a good amount of this. I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of garlic in here, and we're just going to quadruple or whatever we have to do to get this up to where it should be. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme leaves. Well, where's my thyme? There it is. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons. And I'm going to taste it before I'm done to make sure that it's what I want. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, and I'm going to make this into a tablespoon of onion powder. And see what we get. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. Well, we're going to make it a teaspoon. Now it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of dried lemon peel. I don't have dried lemon peel, so I'm going to use my lemon pepper, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in a couple of teaspoons of this. Now let's make it a full tablespoon. It's our seasoning, and we can make it however we want. It calls for celery seed. Well, you can use celery seed, or if you have celery powder, I'm going to use celery powder, and I'm just going to throw in a couple of teaspoons of that. And it calls for a dry mustard. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to throw in some dry mustard. And we'll see what we get out of this. Now, it does not call for parsley flakes, but I like parsley in just about everything. So I'm going to throw in a couple of tablespoons of parsley. And we're getting closer to a half a cup, I believe. We're going to put this on the Nutra-Bullet, and I'm going to taste it and see how it tastes. I'm just going to dump that in here. It's pungent. I think it needs a little more. It needed a little bit less on the thyme, and probably a little less on the lemon pepper, but I'm going to add some more mustard to this. We'll just shake it up in the jar. I'm adding another teaspoon of mustard in there. wet my finger down. This would be good. I think it'd be good on chicken or pork or beef. It could be a replacement for your seasoning in your dressing. It's got that kind of a flavor to it with that thyme in there. And this is going to be another seasoning I'm going to be using in my kitchen. And I'll try to remember to write down my measurements in my comment box or my description box below the video. But y'all might want to try this one out. There's no salt in it whatsoever. For those that don't want salt but they want seasoning on their food, you can always play around with your seasonings and pick and choose seasonings that you like to make a good mix. And that is about approximately 3/4 of a cup, I would say, of seasoning in there.